Good morning, everyone. We will start our event now. Thank you. Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us for the announcement of the Unodc annual report, Synthetic Drugs in East and Southeast Asia, Latest Developments and Challenges for this year, which goes into the information from 2022. My name is TVBS and I am a Unodc illicit drugs analyst based at the Unodc regional office here in Bangkok. With me here today are Mr. Jeremy Douglas, Unodc Regional Representative for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, Ms. Sipakul Meladi, Director of the Foreign Affairs Bureau of the Office of the Narcotics Control Board of Thailand, and Mr. Inshik Shin, Lead Illicit Drugs Analyst at Unodc. So before we begin today, I would like to go over the agenda a little bit so we know what we have in store. First, we will have some opening remarks by Mr. Jeremy Douglas and Ms. Sipakul Meladi, and then we will go into a briefing on the major findings of the report by Mr. Inshik Shin. So for this announcement, we have people joining us here in person at the CCT, and also viewers who are joining us online. So for viewers who are joining us online, for information, we will be taking questions from the online platforms as well. So if you have any questions during the course of this briefing, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will address them after the briefing, along with questions from the floor. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Jeremy Douglas, Unodc Regional Representative for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you, Kundi. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for making time to join us here today. I'd like to particularly thank our colleagues at Propasor, the Office of the Narcotics Control Board of Thailand. Congratulations on yesterday. Which is why the Secretary General is not here. They had a major case just yesterday, and he's in Rayong as a result. But the purpose of today's briefing is to give you the latest snapshot of the synthetic drug situation in Asia Pacific, and traditionally that has meant methamphetamine. That said, the market is really diversifying at the moment, and we're seeing emergence of other synthetic drugs, some of which will surprise the scale of that change. There have been significant changes in the market. I think it's important for us today, as we look at the data that will be presented, that we consider that this is the first report since borders reopened in the post-pandemic period. So in 2022, until about this point last year, still a lot of borders had restrictions. Those restrictions meant there were restrictions on criminal movements, but those restrictions dropped over the second half of last year, and that is when we started seeing a reconnection of criminal groups that traditionally had met within the sub-region to facilitate deals and trafficking of narcotic drugs. They started reconnecting, trafficking patterns started kind of, in a sense, re-establishing themselves to the pre-pandemic stage. So we've seen some changes in routes that are very significant. There's another remarkable trend that my colleague Inshik will brief on in a moment, which is a significant sub-regional change in traffic routes, which has had regional repercussions. We'll go into that detail. And as I said earlier, the developments in another synthetic drug, which are very, very significant for this region and potentially connected regions. The other thing that I would highlight and recommend you pay attention to in his briefing is the changes in the chemical trade, which have resulted to some extent in what we're witnessing now. The significance of the chemical trade should not be underestimated. It fundamentally underpins the synthetic drug business. You cannot produce the synthetic drugs that are flowing across this region without access to chemicals. Those chemicals are moving in volumes, at much higher volumes, than the drugs themselves, because you need multiple times the volume of chemicals to produce the drugs. So very important agenda for this region to start considering is the chemical agenda. So with that, I will draw my comments to a close. And again, thank you for coming. Thank ONCB for joining us here today. A great partner for Unodc in country and at a regional level as we both work together to help address the significant drug challenge this region faces. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeremy. And I would like to invite Ms. Sipakul Meladi, Director of the Foreign Affairs Bureau of ONCB.
Thank you, Kundi, and so Jeremy Douglas, Unodc Regional Rep, and all the guests. Thank you for your time here today. On behalf of the ONCB, Office of the Narcotics Control Board, first of all, please accept apology from my boss, the Secretary Kundi Chai, because he's very busy earlier and unforeseen circumstances, so he couldn't be back today. So it's a great pleasure for me to deliver the opening remarks today and the announcement of the annual report of the Unodc regarding the synthetic drugs is very important. In Thailand, synthetic drugs, in particular methamphetamine, remain drugs of the serious threats, of which large quantity of drugs seized, and also majority of people addicted and also receiving treatment. Transnational crimes and drug syndicate have been targeting Thailand and every country as a transit point and also as well the markets, smuggling drugs from the Golden Triangle and also chemicals and precursors to the Golden Triangle itself for the illicit production. Given the great cooperation among us, Thailand and the country in the sub-region in particular, it's come out to the result of the large amount of these drugs as well as precursors and chemicals is the same tune like Kunjoni just said. So the key message from the Thai government at this moment, apart from our cooperation and great result, we would like to propose regarding the management of the safe handling and disposal of such seized drugs and also chemical. I do ask the Unodc for the support and also the donor countries. It's quite good news that Australia will be the leader, I think, because they table the resolution on the safe disposal of drugs and chemicals as well at the CND. So moreover, with the latest trends of more diversified synthetic psychoactive drugs, products, increasing use of uncontrolled precursor chemicals, and I do believe that forensic information can support us to understand more about these developments as well as for the investigation and our cooperation in the future for effective, not just only law enforcement, but for policy making as well, for the effective response. So I would like to express my appreciation to the global SMART programs of the Unodc for your, timely response in these and new initiatives to enhance forensic capacity of member countries. In conclusion, Thailand fully commits to addressing these drug threats and working closely with the counterparts, and in particular Unodc, and at regional and international levels. At this end, I do believe this report will give us a better understanding of the recent trends of synthetic drugs, which will be beneficial for all stakeholders, for us to redesign the policy, advocating appropriate drug policy, and also implementing effective intervention and responses. I would like to express my deep appreciation again for the contribution, the continued contribution of Unodc representative, you in particular, Jeremy, and your team, for a long time in sharing with us and your support forever. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your remarks. And now, without further ado, I think we can go straight into the briefing of the report. And Sheikh, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is Sheikh Shin. I'm a lead drug analyst for the Unodc Regional Office for Southeast Asia and Pacific. Thank you very much for today, for coming over here. I'm pleased to share the major findings of the 2023 Synthetic Drug Report for East and Southeast Asia. I'd like to start with this slide, which summarizes the main themes of the report. There was a high level of supply of meth in 2022, and we still witness the continued the supply at high levels. And also we witnessed the major shift in the trafficking routes of methamphetamines in 2022 and also early 2023. And with the relaxation of the border restriction, mobility restrictions, we see the organized crime groups in the region has been trying to reconnect with other organized crime groups based in South Asia and the Pacific as well. Once again, we were able to see the record low wholesale price of methamphetamines. And we also witnessed the diversified meth tablet brands since the military takeover in February 2021 in Myanmar. It was highlighted by the Director of Foreign Affairs and also Jeremy that there has been an increased non-controlled chemicals being used by organized crime groups for the production of synthetic drugs. The data on demand is very limited, but nonetheless we were able to see that the polydrug use involving methamphetamine remains problematic for several countries in the region. And what is most important probably of all the findings of this report, we were able to see that the organized crime groups been adopting the same supply-driven market expansion strategy for ketamine. And also we see the emergence of several new synthetic drug products in the region. Let me start with the methamphetamine. In 2022, the seizures of meth decreased for the first time after reporting the continuous increases in seizures of meth over the last decade. In 2022, the meth seizure totaled 151 tons, which is about 20 tons less than 2021. But one particular trend continued, which is the predominant majority of methamphetamine was seized in Southeast Asia, accounting for 91.4% of total meth seizures in East and Southeast Asia. But if you look at very closely, about 75%, I would say, was seized in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and Vietnam. But these 5 countries, basically, it shows that the consolidation of the mass production in the Mekong region. This is the map that shows the change of the mass seizures in 2021 and 2022. You can see that the large decrease were reported from Thailand. Basically, Thailand seized 17 tons less of mass in 2022. And also, steep decrease was noted in particular Yunnan, China. China as a whole, about 7 tons less meth was seized. So the meth seizure total in China was a record low since 2009. Combined this decrease in these 2 countries, basically 24 tons. So that drove the overall decrease in meth seizures in East and Southeast Asia in 2022. It is very important to note that the seizures of meth in Myanmar increased in 2022, especially the crystal meth seizures skyrocketed in Myanmar. As I mentioned earlier, the mass production has been consolidated into Mekong regions. However, the mass coming out from the Mekong regions that reached many different parts of the Asia Pacific. We see the mass coming out from the Mekong to Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Japan, and also Bangladesh and India side as well. It is really important to see how mass is being moved within Myanmar in order to understand how mass is being trafficked out of Myanmar. Because organized crime groups have been trying to find ways to bring large quantities of mass out of Myanmar to reach destination. In 22, there was a dramatic change in terms of the mass trafficking within Myanmar. When you look at it, the largest quantities of crystal meth was seized in Mandalay, which is in the central part of Myanmar. Mandalay is an important transit location where the meth is coming out from Shan State to transiting through Mandalay to go to southern parts of Myanmar, such as Mon and Kain State, and also the western part of Myanmar, such as Rakhine State. It shows that organized crime groups in Myanmar have been trying to move the crystal meth out of Shan using Mandalay as transit to disperse to different parts of Myanmar. And also you can see the increases in the crystal meth seizures in southern parts of Myanmar, Mon and Kain, and western part of Myanmar, Rakhine. Important point is Shan is for the first time ranked 3rd in 2022 when it comes to crystal meth seizures, not the number 1, but 3rd. It shows that organized crime groups have been trying to find ways to bring this crystal meth out of Shan from different channels of Myanmar. Interesting part is we noted that Mon and Kain seizures of crystal meth increased quite a bit in 2022. But if you look at the meth seizure data in Thailand, like across borders, like Tak and Kanchanaburi, those provinces were not recorded as the top 10 crystal meth seizures in their country. That shows us that the trafficking groups have been trying to bring this crystal meth from southern regions of Myanmar by maritime route instead of crossing the land border directly from Myanmar. This is a particular example. In February 2023, Myanmar authorities seized the 1.91 tons of crystal meth on the southern tip of the Myanmar, known as Kokon. This is by far the largest record quantities for crystal meth seizures in that part of the Myanmar. And also several major crystal meth seizures were reported in Mandalay, en route to the southern part of Myanmar, also western part of Myanmar as well. Also, the trafficking group's been using the mixed trafficking modalities, maritime and land route as well. This is a particular example reported from Malaysia, that in February 2023, 1.8 tons of crystal meth was seized in perils. The Malaysian authority informed us that it was first trafficked by maritime from Myanmar to Thailand, and then after that, crossed by land border. So that what we want to highlight here is that organized crime groups have been always trying to look for, circumvent the law enforcement responses adopted by the Mekong and also Southeast Asian law enforcement authorities. So in 2022 and early 2023, we have noted that maritime trafficking has gained a significant importance in crystal meth trafficking in the region. But nonetheless, it is really important to also highlight that organized crime groups have been continuously targeting the land borders in the Mekong. One is Laos. We have highlighted several times over the last few years that the borders between Thailand and Laos has been targeted by organized crime groups for mass trafficking. But now we also started to witnessing the border between Laos and Cambodia has been targeted significantly, especially from Laos to the Stom Trong of Cambodia. There has been several seizures reported from Cambodian authorities that the drugs been trafficked from Laos side. And I think this is really also important to highlight that how much meth has been trafficked from Shan-State, Myanmar to the westward directions to Bangladesh and India. The Yaba trafficking to Bangladesh, meth tablet trafficking basically, is an old story. We all know that. However, we started witnessing the increased quantities of crystal meth has been trafficked from Myanmar to Bangladesh. In 2022, Bangladesh authorities seized 120 kilos of crystal meth. You may think that this is not much compared to Mekong countries, but this is just start. And we see the steady flows of crystal meth, at the same time meth tablets from Myanmar to Bangladesh as well as India. It's literally every day these two authorities in these two countries are reporting every day the seizures of meth, and particularly these tea bag packages. There is huge potential for organized crime groups to stimulate demand of meth in these two countries, and it will guarantee the massive profit for them, given the size of the population of these countries. Mentioned earlier, but there has been again the record low price of the crystal meth, which is quite concerning, despite the decreases in seizures of crystal meth, the meth in general. It shows that the supply remains at high in 2022. For instance, when you look at the Thailand data, 2022, 1 kilo of crystal meth was about US $4,000. In Laos, it's about US $2,000. But when we met with the border officials in Thailand, some informed us that it could be as low as $1,000 per kilogram. So this is really low price. And I remember that it was before the meth supply kicked in from the Golden Triangle side, it was close to $20,000 per kilogram. So it's continuously going down, which is a significant concern. Another major development is the diverse, I would say, actors involved in meth tablet supply. When you look at it, not major meth tablet brands consumed in the region is 999 and Y1. Those are two. And when you look at it, these other logos, basically, that do not belong to 991 or Y1 has increased quite rapidly over the last few years. Especially in 2021, there was 13% of all meth tablets seized in Thailand were packaged in the other branding. But in 2022, it further increased to 26%. This is a major development. It kind of concurrent with the military takeover in Myanmar in February 2021. Non-controlled chemical, this is a major challenge for this region, but also it has become very prominent issues across the worldwide. When you look at it, this region had a problem in terms of the dealing with the controlled substances, controlled chemical as well. But because of the increased use of non-controlled chemical, it adds more complexity for authorities to deal with that. And one particular example is a benzyl cyanide, which can be used for production of main meth precursor P2P, we see that these chemicals have been seized in Mekong, in route to Myanmar, as well as in Myanmar as well. This chemical is not controlled internationally. And this is just one example. There are other chemicals, the non-controlled in nature, like sodium hydroxide, ethyl acetate. Those things can be adopted during the process of production of synthetic drugs. But those that are not controlled add more complexity for authorities to deal with this ever-evolving synthetic drug problem. And we've been also closely monitoring the trade of chemicals by online business-to-business platform known as B2B, as well as social networks. And the companies, there have been some of the companies been actively trading those non-controlled chemicals, which does not constitute legal problem because it's non-controlled. But once these chemicals are controlled internationally, they quickly move their operation into dark web, and they're offering the same substances through dark web sites. And also, in dark web, they offer other services such as mislabeling, freight product packagings, and specialized freight forwarding services. So these all contribute to the evolving synthetic drug problems in this region. And I'd like to also highlight some of the other organized crime groups, basically based in the outside these regions, Mexican drug cartels, and also African drug syndicates, also West Asian drug trafficking groups. But I'd like to just focus on the Mexican drug cartels today. This region has been used as a transit by Mexican drug cartels for trafficking meth, in particular to Oceania. There were a few cases that Hong Kong authorities seized, like liquid methamphetamines that trafficked from North America, Mexico basically, to as a transit to Australia. But also Philippine authority reported the small laboratories that were used for the conversion meth to crystal methamphetamine that was set up by the French and Canadians and Filipino nationals that were, the further investigation revealed that they were connected to Mexican drug cartels. When it comes to use, as I mentioned earlier, there is very limited understanding. However, we were able to see a lot of meth users, in fact, the holy drug users. When you look at it in Thailand, there's one research found that 44% of meth users use other substances together with meth, mainly for antidepressant pharmaceutical products, but as well as ketamines, ecstasy, and heroin. In Vietnam, even close to 60% of users identified in the countries using meth together with ketamine, heroin, and cannabis as well. I shared some of the main findings on meth, and I would like to move on to ketamine. For ketamine, in 2022, record quantities of ketamine were seized. 27 tons of this drug was seized in East and Southeast Asia. As you can see, the seizures, increases in seizures were driven by Southeast Asian countries. You will be surprised, Cambodia alone seized about half of the 27.4 tons. And this is mainly because of the industrial scale ketamine production has been taking place in Cambodia. This is just one example of a photo. But let me show you the short video to show the scale of the ketamine production in Cambodia. Yes, Unodc was there to assess these chemical production facilities in Cambodia, also storage facilities. Cambodian authorities seized 16 industrial ketamine production facilities and the chemical storage sites. This is the biggest lab that I've ever seen during my career with the Unodc, and the reactor size is about at least 5,000 liters, really big scale facilities. It tells us that there is a powerful organized crime groups behind of setting up these facilities, and they're pushing this supply of ketamine into the region. What we have observed in the mass market, which is quite concerning because we know how mass market has evolved since the supply kicked in mid the 2010s. We are seeing the same trajectory from the ketamine supply. Ketamine is not only produced in Cambodia, we all know that ketamine is also produced in the Golden Triangle. And one of the major developments that we have seen is the mixed shipments of ketamine and methamphetamines. There were several cases like this in 2022, which were not really observed previous years. It may tell us that organized crime has been trying to stimulate ketamine demand by putting together with crystal meth, which is more widely used in this region. For other synthetic drugs, ecstasy, much smaller market compared to meth and ketamine. When it comes to seizures in 2022, about 7 million tablets were seized. When you look at the meth tablets, it's close to 1 billion. So we're talking about very small segments of the synthetic drug markets. Major source still remains Europe, countries in Europe. And then the seizures are mainly made in like Malaysia, Indonesia, and also some East Asian countries. What is important is the ecstasy, the main ingredient, MDMA, has been mixed together with different substances, primarily with ketamines and meth, and also some other products like benzodiazepine substances. When you look at it, these called happy water products, it's been emerging across Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And when you look at it, the packagings are all different. It shows that the actors involved in production of happy waters is not unified, not like crystal meth production. And also there are several new synthetic substances were reported from the countries in the region. And also we have noticed that the synthetic cannabinoids has been most frequently identified the new synthetic substance in the region. And there some of the law enforcement authorities been informed us that some of the users prefer to use synthetic cannabinoids because it does not really have a distinct cannabis smell. To conclude, let me repeat some of the major findings before I started. First, the meth supply level remained high in 2022, and decreases in seizures of meth in 2022. It seems very, very clear to us that the shift in the trafficking now have resulted in this organized crime groups in successfully putting this meth into the market. That led to the record low price of the crystal meth. And also we see the diversified meth tablet trends in the region that has further accelerated in 2022. And the polydrug use of meth remains problematic in the region. And non-controlled chemicals, and also organized crime groups in using creative chemical methods and sourcing the chemicals through the online, through the dark web as well, to meet the scale of the meth and other synthetic drug production. Supply-driven market expansion strategy is very clear for ketamine markets. I think all the region all the countries in the region need to be prepared. We have been informed from the country that are not really known for ketamine use is starting to seizing increased quantities of ketamine. This is quite concerning. And all in all, I would like to highlight that this evolving the synthetic drug markets can be possible without the steady supply of chemicals, and we really need to work on these chemical matters. I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ishe, for that comprehensive briefing on the major findings of the report. So before we go into the questions, we have some questions online already, so I think we'll take 2 from online questions, and then we'll open the floor to people here for questions from who are with us here at FCCT. So for the first question that we have, I would like to address this perhaps to Jeremy. The question is, that's a significant change in trafficking in Myanmar. How did that happen, and how did no one notice this change in patterns?
I think we have to remember traffickers are smart. Their job is to evade police, to move product to market and to connect to the market. And the picture didn't really emerge from Yunnan for the rest of the world until very recently. And that drop in Yunnan and the drop as well in Thailand, which really is pronounced in northern Thailand last year, was a clear routing around northern Myanmar, or northern Thailand and the Golden Triangle, pushing that supply down the middle of the country to the end of the sea, as Inchik rightly highlighted. I think it's really important to note that I think a lot of the product, given the price data that we just looked at, continuing to decline, that other reports from all the countries about the availability on the street being extremely high, I think we have to look at the fact that just more drugs sailed by. Traffickers were a little more successful last year than in the previous, and they were able to connect to market, mainly using maritime routes that were not noticed by people over the course of the year. I think one more thing I would highlight on Myanmar that is very important was the other slide that he had about the small tableting operations that are running in Shan State. That's a massive change from only 2 years ago. There are now a whole host of brands of yaba or methamphetamine tablets flooding Laos, Thailand, even making their way into Cambodia and Vietnam, as well as within Myanmar itself. But that diversity is associated with a whole diversity of armed groups and militias within the country which are tableting the drug at this time. So we see the drop of the ones that are produced by the Northern Alliance group, or the Northern group as they so-called, the Southern group as they so-called, the 999 and the Y1. But frankly, all those little brands reflect the fact that there's been an uptick amongst all the small armed groups in the country.
Thank you very much. And I think one more question online before the floor questions. This one, I think, that's for Inchik. If you could take this question. There's a question about ketamine. So the amount of ketamine seized in the region is staggering. So where is it all going? Who's using it? And is there really a demand for ketamine?
This is actually very excellent questions. This ketamine use, we have seen this that in meth market as well. Supply can create demand when it comes to controlled substances. For ketamine right now, mainly the biggest user populations in China and Taiwan. But now we see the ketamine use has been increasing across the countries in the region. First, starting with the Southeast Asian countries, like Thailand, for instance, and Vietnam. But now we see the ketamine use has increased in East Asian countries as well. My home country, Korea, as well, they started to seizing increased quantities of ketamine, as well as people being identified as ketamine users. Japan, the same, and Australia and New Zealand starting to seizing also ketamines and people involved in the ketamine use. So we see that how the supply can create demand in the region, and I think that's so the user population in the regions has been basically expanded.
Thank you very much, Inchik. Yes, from the information on ketamine, just to add a little bit to Inchik's responses, we saw that there was a record amounts of ketamine seized in 2022, most of it from Cambodia, but actually virtually all countries and territories in East and Southeast Asia seized more ketamine in 2022 than they did in 2021. So the only Hong Kong, China seized less, but everywhere else increasing ketamine seizures across the board in the region. So does anyone here at the CCT have any questions? Yes, there's a microphone back there, so please, Ms. Mei Wong, I think it's you.
Good morning, May from Channel News Asia, Singapore television station. Thank you very much for the very comprehensive report, as well as a description of that. Got a couple of questions I'd like to find out, just on the back of the ketamine question, is do you foresee ketamine overtaking methamphetamine being the most used drug in Southeast Asia because of the seizure? And when we talk about this increase in the use of maritime routes, do you see that becoming the new trend going forward, and how difficult is that going to be tracked? Because when you're out at sea, would that make it more difficult to circumvent, or excuse me, to actually confiscate as opposed to land checkpoints? Thank you.
At this point, it's quite difficult to see the ketamine will take over mass market. If anything, I think that the mass will remain. I think the primary synthetic drugs in the region has a long history of the mass use in this particular world. But the ketamine will definitely expand. I think right now we see that the trajectory is really happening. But taking over math might be little too early to say and might be unlikely from my point of view.
I would just add on the ketamine that I think what we're looking at is organized crime groups very creatively diversifying their product line. And as he said with the mixed shipments, they're putting ketamine into methamphetamine shipments so that the end networks that distribute this stuff to the street are distributing 2 drugs instead of simply 1. They're building market right now. So, but again, I agree with him. I don't think it'll overtake methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is a very different drug. It's highly addictive. Ketamine is a bit niche, but nonetheless extremely concerning. And I think we have to look at the fact that this region has a massive population base. So there's a lot of possible consumers in this region. Over 2 billion people if you count in East and Southeast Asia. It's an enormous market. On the second question, I could take it on the maritime, May. I think as you interrogate the data and you look at what happened inside Myanmar, it's most definitely true that the shipments were missed. And especially when you look at that price data. A lot of product literally, quote unquote, sailed by on the high seas. And I think we now look at what happened yesterday with ONCB. The Secretary General was involved in maritime seizure just yesterday of just over 900 kilos. Just to the east of this town. The point that we kind of made at the beginning was the reconnection of criminal groups that has occurred since borders reopened. There's been movement, criminals were also similarly restricted by COVID border closures. There are also reluctance after the Anon operation to use some encrypted apps. They're now reconnecting, they're making face-to-face contact in this region, facilitating major shipments as we speak. Thailand in the last month alone has seized over 8 tons of crystal methamphetamine. Last year they only seized 9 and a bit. So that's in 30 days. So we're looking at a massive change in trafficking patterns as we speak, as these major loads are negotiated and shipped. Maritime will feature heavily in that for the reason you mentioned, which is, frankly, it's hard to police the high seas, especially on oceans like the Andaman that are wide open and lots of fishing vessels, but even apparently in the Gulf of Thailand.
Maybe I just add on a little bit regarding the operation-wise, the law enforcement, upon your question regarding whether it would be more difficult or not, in my opinion, I don't think it will be even harder because actually because to traffic by sea is going to be the big batch, for the return of investment because they need to, that means they're going to move in a big batch. So actually it's based on intelligence, purely for the big one. So actually it's not harder, but it's as hard as the trafficking by land.
Yeah, you can't search all the vessels. It's intelligence that led to what happened yesterday, and it's intelligence that will lead to others like it.
Thank you. Actually, if you don't mind, there is one question online that related to the discussion just now, so if you don't mind, I would like to ask that one first before we go back to the floor. So we have a question actually for ONCB. The question is that Thailand has made a lot of big meth seizures recently, and we mentioned already the one yesterday in Rayong. So the question is, what happened for that case, and also how frequently is the Gulf of Thailand being used for trafficking?
Actually, to be honest, it's just recently, it's kind of the resuming of normalcy at this moment. They try, for the criminals, they try to find the roots, as always. How can they make the profits as much as possible? And when we press the pressures on the north and on the northeast, you see the trends of shifting the routes to the west. And maybe just a little bit add on the trends earlier. How can we know that in Myanmar they changed the routes as well? We just had a bilateral meeting with the Myanmar as well. They analyzed similar to it's correct, it's responsive to the real situation though. Because Myanmar also noticed the shifting of the routes to the west as well. in particular for the big batch of the ice and ketamine in particular. Yeah, so for Thailand, it's just a coming back of situation. Actually, we found the more often use of the maritime trafficking during the COVID-19, but because of the response was quick, we can see the drifting of a lot of drugs, ice, and we have close cooperation with the neighboring countries because we share the same situation with the Cambodia and Vietnam. And in particular for OECD, we have the Minister Council for OECD based in Hanoi, based in Phnom Penh. So we follow up and monitor the situation closely and follow tracks of the criminal. So during the COVID, they changed the routes to the west, the Andaman Sea instead. Now, as in the south at this moment, I think it's just the coming back. So we will keep monitor and expand the investigation with our counterparts closely.
I think the point that she made just now about its return to normalcy. So we're looking at a return to the pre-pandemic patterns where we used to see massive shipments that were moving, and that was the pattern in 2019 particularly. And I think we're back at that pattern. We're looking at we're in the middle of it right now.
Thank you very much, and from the floor, please.
Good morning. My name is Esther Roman. I'm with the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration from the U.S. I have a question. You touched a little bit on the influence or the presence of the Mexican DTOs in the region. Do you know if those are related to CJ&G or Sinaloa? And you said that there were meth labs that had been set up here in the region. Do you have data saying that meth labs have actually been seized and the workers are coming in from, I think you said, French, Cambodian, and Filipino workers? So I'm very interested in whether or not you can say if there's actually a Mexican DTO presence versus an influence of the Mexican DTOs. That's my first question. The second question is on the markings of the meth tablet, the Yaba tablets, the Y1 or the 999. Mr. Douglas touched a little bit on it as far as being able to associate those labels to different areas where they're being made. Can you touch a little bit on that? And then one more question. Are you seeing any fentanyl in the region, or do you see that that's becoming a problem, going to become a problem here? Thank you.
I was done. Thank you very much. For the Mexican cartels, yes, we do see that influence. I would say that Mexican is producing meth here. There is no need for Mexicans coming here Mexican drug cartels are coming here to produce methamphetamine in the region. The case that I mentioned during my presentation, there are particular countries in East and South Asia been targeted as the transit for mass traffic from Mexico. One is Philippines, and also Hong Kong, and also Korea. There were three were, I would say, targeted as Mexican drug cartels as a transit for trafficking crystal meth to Australia. The particular lab, it was very small scale in fact, and it was not Cambodian, it was French and Canadian and Filipino, and there's three people set up a small scale, I would say, the mass conversion lab. There is no evidence that there was the mass was produced from the scratch. It was more likely, highly likely, the liquid mass was imported in the Philippines and then converted in that lab because there was no precursor chemicals, but just for the chemical they needed for conversion for liquid mass to crystal mass. So all in all, there is no really need for Mexican drug cartels to come over here to expand the market because there is already strong organized crime groups feeding the mass and other synthetic drugs in the region. And I will move to the third questions. I will leave the second questions to Jeremy. When it comes to fentanyl, it's not, of course, not really noted when it comes to fentanyl use in the region. However, there is some indications the availability of this particular substance. For instance, in Korea, there were people been using, especially younger populations, been fentanyl pharmaceutical products for non-medical use. It's quite low over the last few years. So the number of prescriptions for fentanyl been increased over the last few years, which could create some demand for the illegal synthetic opioid products. But at the moment, other than that, not really that we have seen the use in the region.
We have seen an uptick in heroin supply, which is not the same, but just notably in Shan State last year. And we're analyzing the data right now. We're in the middle of it for the opium production this year, and so we'll publish it at the end. But there was a notable increase last year, so fentanyl hasn't yet infiltrated the heroin market here in this region, or at least minimally. So I would just add that, I think. The other point that you may asked about tablet marks. So ONCB, actually, kudos to them. They do really incredible tracking of this. So what they do is they actually track the shipments and analyze the markings across the shipments, and they share that forensic intelligence with us. It's really helpful because what they did, it's primarily the packaging. Sometimes the tool markings are similar or they're slightly different, but the packaging themselves associated with different small armed groups is very different. So we've got an emergence up to now 24% from two pre-coup, or pre-military takeover, right, in the country. So we have a very distinct change within that. I think that has profound sub-regional challenges because now you no longer have two dominant suppliers. You have now a couple dozen, really, suppliers.
Yeah, okay. May I add on just a little bit regarding the, Yaba, the meth tablets, the forensic lab. Our work, we have done for a long time because we have the labs of our own, kind of the institute, and almost the exhibits of the cases, more than 80%, we have the lab analysis at ONCB. So we have a very good data bank, not just only physical, but also the scientific evidence regarding the analytical results. So we compare even, the degree of the Y, long tail, short tail, how many degree different like that. And actually it's helped in intelligence investigation expansion as well, because we can tell which group, after we analyze that, we can see the customized logos and stuff, and we can identify the groups who produce it or who make the tablet like that. Okay, so if you want to learn more, you're more than welcome to come to visit our lab. And also you can, we produce quarterly report regarding our analytical results. Not just only the Yaba, it's also ice and ketamine and happy water as well. So you're more than welcome if you want to. And regarding fentanyl, we just went to US and it's quite a concern. And it's a good news. We have the recent big project with the DEA. Yes, we have some DEA chemicals experts here as well. Oh, not hiding them. Yeah. Good news. At this moment, we can guarantee that at the Golden Triangle, they still not start the production of fentanyl yet, because we have the program earlier before the DEA jumped in. The cooperation with the labs in the CLMV countries, Thailand has been long supporter for them for development of their forensic analytical work. So we provide them with the equipment, GCMC, and the training for capacity building as well, and we collect the data of our neighboring country as well. So recently we told DEA at the headquarters as well that the samples, we have a big project now, we're going to collect more than, I think, 300, but right now we start analyze already so far 100, I think. None of them show the trace of making fentanyl. So, for safe side at this moment.
Thank you. Okay, one question from the floor. And after this question, we also have some more questions from online. So after this question, online questions.
Hello, Laura Bicker from the BBC. Thank you so much for presenting your report to us today. I've got two questions. Again, I'm going to be that person. If I can ask the first one on Myanmar, it's a significant increase in seizures in Myanmar. Which outside police forces are working with the junta within Myanmar to ensure that these routes are looked at and monitored? And what particular challenges are you facing within Myanmar since the coup? And secondly, when it comes to the maritime routes, I mean, I saw yesterday when I was speaking with officers when we were looking at the seizure yesterday of the crystal meth, he was saying that it takes 100 officers to go through the intelligence. It's a 4-month operation. So does that mean with the diversion of these routes, you're going to have to move more officers towards the Andaman Sea or the Gulf of Thailand? Thank you very much.
Maybe respond to the second question first. Actually, no need to remove, but I think coordination closer, because we have Sanchon TMAC, I think English, the shorter name. Because actually we cooperate with them for a long time, and is their authority for the region, the maritime region that they have the power on, and we have the integrated forces under Songchon, so it can work I think effectively already. Basically, whether it will be successful or not is it beginning from the good intelligence first, to beef up the authorities at the end of the process. I think it's not difficult. We have the Region 2 or NCB Region 2, we have Police Region 2, we have Sanchon, we have for beefing up the force is not difficult, but to monitor and keep tracks. We can follow them from the north, we can follow them, and we can talk to the neighboring countries. So it's just to keep up with the trends, with the intelligence, with the informant, whether we verified it well, and we can keep track them, and then they can start the operation nicely. This one to the second question. Regarding the challenges, the real challenge in Myanmar. As long as the security, political and security issues this is the answer from the high level, the policy level in Myanmar government, though, when we try to, ask for cooperation from them, they said, okay, as long as the political and security issues still there, no, reversely, actually, they said, they try to solve the political and the social security problem in their country first, and then the drug problem will succeed. So the real challenge, I can interpret from what they say, means that we need to help them, to at least a certain degree of the political and peace along the border. So then the authority themselves can get access to the problematic area along the border. In particular, that's the strategic area for Thailand. Yeah. I talk on behalf of the Thailand government only. Okay, in particular, the situation along the border in the north of Thailand, we also have the proactive projects there as well, and it has been for more than 2 decades. You might have known the alternative development that is the 2-pronged strategy, but just only to increase the stability and political peace and stability along the area to reduce the problem of the drug production. It's also the long-term and sustainable development to help them to find alternative income. Yeah, that's at least we successful to have our Thai project in the territory of Myanmar along the border. Yeah.
I would add to that, you asked kind of 2-part question there. One was who is cooperating, and clearly Thailand has a relationship with Myanmar, which is ongoing. Ours is a bit fragmented at the moment, but nonetheless we have staff in the country that are doing good work in Shan State. as well as other parts of the country on different topics, development, drug treatment. But there are other countries cooperating. China, other neighboring countries are also cooperating. Even international partners are currently cooperating. If you follow, Senate testimony in Australia, you'll see that they are. The National Police Chief has testified to that effect. They just, again, testified to that effect last week, my understanding, where they talked about the extent to which that cooperation is ongoing. So it's very clear that there is cooperation from a number of governments for the reasons that Kun Ying just said, which is, if you're going to address this problem, you have to have conversations with people in the country, despite the fact that the situation, the political and security situation, is very challenging. And to that point, I would say, if you look at the overall Myanmar figure, and then you look at that one map that Inchik presented with the different decreases and increases in different parts and the different trafficking routes in the country, I think it's quite concerning what we see in Shan State. Shan State is the epicenter of production for Asia Pacific, and yet seizures dropped in that state massively last year. Why? It's because of the political and security situation in Shan State. In a sense, there's a lack of access by certain authorities. There's a lack of capacity, given the current security context, to go into Shan State. And essentially, that allows a lot of these little groups that are tableting, or a lot of the other groups that are producing ice, to essentially have a free hand. They've allowed that in turn has a spillover effect into Thailand, into the center of Myanmar, or the rest of the region, and therefore the change in trafficking routes. So you have to really drill into the country to see where that's dropping. But to see it drop in Shan like that is unprecedented. It's never occurred, and that's directly related to other data you look in the country around conflict and so on and so forth. You can't look at the two types of information as separate.
Thank you very much. I know it's close to 12, but I think there are still some online questions. I think we can take 2 online questions and then maybe end. So the first question, also related to the maritime trafficking, is we have the question on bearing in mind the difficulty of interdicting the flow of products, quote unquote, sailing by and traveling on land. Does the panel see the potential for drone surveillance, both for smuggling and IUU fishing? So illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing.
Drone surveillance.
Yes, drone surveillance. Yeah.
I can answer in general terms, and maybe you can add, but there are drones in use by governments in the region to track at the borders in the north, but also I understand TIMEC as well uses drone technology to track maritime shipments. I can't speak to the extent of it, but they are doing that. We've also worked with TIMEC and provided some technology in that space to help them to do some surveillance, but maybe you want to. Is there anything to add? No?
Yeah. Using all technology is okay.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, great. So I think the last question for today, considering the time, this is a question on chemicals. Maybe you could take this one. The question is, what is the latest situation on the chemical trade? It must be massive, considering all the drugs that are coming out of the region. Where are all the chemicals coming from?
Yes, the chemical is, of course, massive quantities of chemicals been traded, also traffic as well. But if we have to name the countries, when it comes by quantities, probably China, India, which is not surprising because given their less than chemical industry size compared to other countries. But I would say that Asia in general, because Asia is a home for the chemical industry, basically at the global level. So we see several other countries in the regions, including Thailand, Vietnam, whose chemicals been coming from this part of the world to the drug production site in the region.
Actually, I would add something very interesting about that. So we've seen, he mentioned in his talk that non-controlled chemicals are increasingly in use. He also just mentioned China and India as the two big sources. This year has seen a particular uptick in supply from India, which may indicate controls in China are more effective. Time will tell. But I think if you look at, for example, he presented a very unique situation. We were in a drug lab, not myself, he and a couple of colleagues last year for several days, a series of drug labs and warehouses in Cambodia documenting everything. And in the Cambodian context, with all of those large ketamine laboratories and synthetic drug laboratories, there were chemicals found from 12 countries. And we've taken the labels and documented that. Literally 12 countries around the world. the dominance was this region, like chemicals important and less important from different countries, but also as far afield as Europe. It's quite amazing what was in there. Through brokers that are based here in the region, but nonetheless, that shows you that I think there's creativity in sourcing when necessary. You can get them from various sources. It's also very important when you're talking about chemicals, though, to look at this region as the epicenter of the global chemical trade, because you cannot have production in Mexico without chemicals, and they come from here. So when you see the answer to the Mexican cartels was partial, because fundamentally they are here, they're sourcing chemicals here, but potentially through different marketplaces online, but also physically with their partners here in the region procuring chemicals. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yes, last question.
yeah, sorry for the last minute. My name is Lin Hao. I'm from Xinhua News Agency. You touched on the cross-border cooperation a little bit. China is it's bordering the major routes, the Golden Triangles and those kind of things. Can you explain China's roles in cross-border among your agency and the regional cooperation in tackling the problem you have from Ally today?
We work fairly closely with China, particularly an agency called the NNCC, which is part of the Ministry of Public Security. So we work extensively with them on data analysis, but also some projects, some cooperation projects. And this year they're hosting a political process of the Mekong states. The ministers from the Mekong will be gathering in Beijing to discuss an action plan on drug trafficking and production and use in the Mekong region. So they take a bit of a political leadership role in that sense with the Mekong states. We act as a bit of a secretariat for that process. So we have a very good, close, cooperative relationship with China as an agency, as they are a key member state, P5 Security Council member in the UN. So we work with them. At the same time, you asked another part to your question, which was about China being on the front lines. I think we witnessed last year that drop in Yunnan. Yunnan is the gateway into China for the product out of the Golden Triangle, and a massive drop occurred within China, largely driven by a drop within Yunnan. And that is as a result from everything, all the indicators we have. The increased effort that they put on the border there was very, very significant. So they had a lot of extra law enforcement presence and border control effort placed there. They also had another effort, which was Operation Clean Borders, which was to stop chemical flow going through, which may indicate why we're seeing other countries pick up in terms of the supply of chemical into the Golden Triangle, i.e. India. But the point being that drop drove the regional drop. So China is on the front lines, but China has had a massive effort on those front lines, just a little less publicized than other states. Thank you.
Okay, just to add on, just agree and more information regarding the China cooperation with the countries in the sub-region, and not just only the framework of the Unodc. They also initiate a project called the Safe Mekong Coordination Project. So at this moment it's still running on, and they put a real hard effort because they conduct many operations along the border as well. In particular with Thailand, we quite joined and quite tightly regarding the chemical control. They also provide a lecturer and also the training course for the chemical controls for the countries in this region as well. Yeah, just to add on.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a bit after 12. I think that's enough for today, for time for today. For everyone who's here, we'll still be around. So if you have any questions, you can come up to us and ask us after the event is over. So thank you very much once again for joining us. You can download a copy of the report from the Unodc Regional Office website. It's available there now. And thank you very much once again for coming and for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.